Running as well. Not bad for the middle of getting to Thanks for coming out in the middle of January to a talk. I know it's kind of hard to get excited enough to come out in a time like this, but hopefully it's a good new beginning time, time to turn over a new leaf and all that. One of my things I plan to do in 2010 is certainly to do what my neighbor Philip has done. He's going to talk to us about today, which is put solar electric on my house. And Philip has really convinced me and my wife that we can do it even though we don't have any money. And in fact, we'll make money off of it. And so that's what makes it so special. I suppose I should introduce myself first before I chatter. My name is Roger Lohman. I'm the CEO and president of the Green Party Riding Association of this riding, which is Markham Unionville. And our friends, next door neighbors, the Riding Association for Oak Ridges Markham are co-sponsoring this event tonight. And so we want to put the emphasis on hearing the talk so we can all learn something to do, since clearly the federal government isn't going to do anything about global warming, so but maybe we can do a little something ourselves. So we're going to let Philip talk, then we're going to we have two candidates here today, two Green Party candidates, one from our riding, which is Adam. Stand up. Adam Poon. And then we also have another candidate from the north, Griffin Heitas from Oak Ridges Markham. So what we're going to do is I'm going to let Adam introduce Philip briefly, and then Philip will give his talk, which will take a little more than an hour. We'll give him plenty of time to get all the facts in. And then we're going to have Griffin and Adam come up and say a few words about what the Green Party thinks needs to happen, basically, in order for us to move to a sustainable energy economy in Canada. So I'm going to turn it over to Adam and let him do the introductions.
Thank you, Roger. Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to tell you very brief why we have this session. It's just before I know Philip, and I visit Roger, and then I see this panel. Just attract my attention. I said, cool, that is something I look for, and I want to do something similar. And then, coincidentally, Philip just go out. So I say, hey, I don't know even who is it. Just chat about that. That is how it began. So I think, hey, how about then I would like to know your experience. Because I believe, not only me, but probably all of you is interested about to know how we possibly can have something similar. So they come up with the idea, said, how about we just organize something like that? That's how they come about. And that reflects it. A lot of us already have that idea, how we can just do something, really. We talk about that a lot of times, how to make our living more greener. We think that. But the idea is here, and then how? From here to get to the point. And so I would like to have this opportunity and to share his experience, how he do it. And then we can take this advantage to formulate how we can approach it. And for the moment, we are independent instead of we don't have any sponsor commercial. We just want to make it independent, purely facts. That is all we believe. So now I turn the floor to Philip.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for coming. I guess I've done this 2-3 times now, and the reason I'm here, is that Roger said, you ought to talk about this. So here I am. But one of the, I've always been, fascinated by renewable energy, and it's, you know, it's one of the things that's always sort of attracted me, and sort of in terms of you know, offsetting all the consumption that we have in our homes. And really when you know, when I was thinking about doing this, you know, originally I was just going to sort of do partly solar hot water, and then, you know, maybe if, you know, if the electricity sort of made sense, I would do a little bit of that, and then just sort of, you know, record the, you know, what it generated, and so I would see what I had. And then, you know, as time went along, you know, sort of I felt myself, and I think generally, you know, we see that in society at large, is that, you know, people sense more an urgency of doing something a little more than just a little bit. So I sort of looked at my house and I said, well, you know, what could I do? You know, if you know, if I really wanted to do the maximum that I could on my house, what could that be? And so I got some guys, local Markham guys, Generation PV, they're a company that installs these kind of systems, to come over, and, you know, we went through, they have one of these little, you know, sundial things that you go up and stand on the roof, and it tells you where you are, and, you know, where the sun is, and where it's going to be during the different seasons, and what it could generate over a year. And so, you know, we started talking about it. And I'm an electrical engineer, and I love, you know, again, so the energy stuff is interesting to me, obviously, for more than probably the typical person. But so, you know, so I really sort of took it as a challenge to see what I could make out of it, and to see what the math would be, because, you know, I mean, we all hear, and I guess you guys are here for the same reason as you know, you hear a lot of talk about it, but you don't see it around a lot. I mean, it's not like you're driving down the street, you know, solar, and I guess it makes sense as you read about it in the news every now and then, and, you know, it seems like a few crazy people do it here and there, but that's about it, right? And you know, I think the problem also is that you end up, you know, your only interface typically is with a company, and the company's trying to sell you something, obviously, what they, you know, it's their business, right? Their livelihood. So you take what they say with a grain of salt. So I figured, I'm in a position where I've done it, I've paid for it, I've gone through the taxes, I've gone through the math, I've gone through setting it up with PowerStream, I've gone through all of that stuff, and I've lived it. So I can tell you exactly about all of that stuff. So any questions you have that I don't go through, you know, ask away, because that's, to me, those are the kind of questions that, you know, that need to be answered. You need to satisfy yourself. Hopefully at the end of tonight you'll go, okay, now I've got enough to make a decision about what I want to do. So, you know, our family, we talked about it, and I've talked about some of the reasons, but we really wanted to make a difference, you know, and I underline the word positive here because, you know, we get into, you know, this mindset of conservation, got to do less, got to leave a smaller footprint, we got to reduce our carbon footprint, reduce our, you know, and you end up going, well, you know, if life is about less, you know, what is there? It's not a really motivating prospect, right? So, you know, hopefully if we're here, we can make a positive difference as opposed to be less bad. It's not really energizing to say, oh, I did less bad today. You know, I don't find that really a great experience. So when you put up solar panels, you're actually producing something. You're producing something positive, something from the sun. Something's going to be there tomorrow, next year, and 50 years from now. And so you really are doing something that, you know, basically unplugs you from how the grid is running. So, and as I mentioned, I wanted to get firsthand what the deal was on everything from cash to performance, and I want to get on with it. And as I said, I'm a green guy. I've always been. And nature has been, you know, something that I find, you know, one of the most satisfying things. So you know, building less power generation, all that kind of stuff, and pollution, air pollution, water pollution, those kind of things are important to me. So I figure this is a way of doing something. This is a picture some of you may have seen. This is a picture from outer space, obviously. But it's a picture of waste, right? You figure this is lights at night. Now, we're not up here. We can't see these lights. So this is actually light that's not shining on the ground. Lighting up the ground is lights that are like here, that are out here, that are lampposts that are, you know, you can see the whole lamp, and obviously half of it's going up where no one cares about, right? Except, you know, the Martians, I guess. You can see how our power grid is laid out, right? So we use a lot of power, and we use a lot of power and waste a lot of it, right? So where does it come from? Well, this is Ontario's mix, right? So third nuclear, 23%, so about a quarter of water, about 19% coal, 16% gas, and there you go. Renewables, wind, a couple of percentage points, right? So solar's not even, wouldn't even be the thickness of the line, right? That's how little. Obviously, power generation, no matter what it is, has consequences. There's consequences to solar, right? I mean, you've got to make these panels, right? So that means you're pulling resources out of the ground. You've got a manufacturing process. There are chemicals that you use in the manufacturing process, and the rinsing of the the electronic components and all of that kind of stuff. So, it's not for free, and and all the different things have a different baggage. So I look at it and go, I figure this probably has less baggage than most of the hydro, because even hydro, I mean, when you dam and flood things, not exactly a great scenario either if you're one of the million people that have to be displaced in China because of the Seven Gorges Dam, right? So, yeah, it's renewable, but it also has consequences. But this is, these are my 4 kids, and this is actually, even we're in Markham now, I can talk about Markham. So that's Markham Road, and the train, that's the overpass on 14th Avenue. So Markham and 14th, the Staples is just right there, and this is now, I don't know what it is, Royal Bank has a branch there. And so this doesn't exist now. Right? This is all, there used to be a wetland, and now it's buildings and pavement. So things change pretty quickly, but you can see the impact. I mean, there's a dead Canada goose there. So I mean, even the environmental green space that we have here isn't exactly the friendliest kind of space, and that's a problem. And I mean, our kids are growing up. My kids are growing up saying, what are you doing about this, right? And obviously, relative to them, I'm in a position of power, as small as we all are individually. But that we certainly do have an obligation to them. This is one of my twins that I lucked out taking this picture, which is out in the field. But I felt it was a real, it's a real clinging thing. Like, our balance with nature is really in our hands; it's not in their hands. So, this is something. That quote from Margaret Mead you've heard before: "Never doubt that a small group of people can change the world." It's the only thing that ever has. It really is true. I mean, it really does start by individual people, and you read back about all the revolutions. They all start with a handful. It's never pretty for the first few, and then eventually, things change. So we're there. So this is what this presentation is about. That big ball that's out there. So we're going to talk about 2 different solar things tonight. One is solar electricity, the other solar hot water. So, and they're different. They use different technologies. So if people are just talking about solar, it can mean a lot of different things. And there are a whole lot of technologies that are driven from solar. So when we talk about solar power, we're talking about solar electric power. But there's also thermal power as well. So you just got to be clear. One is electricity, and then there's the other, which is solar hot water. And I'll talk about both of those technologies since I got them both installed. Obviously, the first thing you want to do is do what I was, talking about. That's not the fun part, but is to cut consumption, right? I mean, the reality is that consumption is not only the cheapest thing to do in terms of saving power, but it's the easiest thing to do. And I mean, it's less and less and less and less, but the math is really amazing. And when you look at swapping out obviously incandescent lights with compact fluorescents, or upgrading stove, fridge, dishwasher, all of those things, furnace, I did all of those things, and they make a big difference. And it's cheaper. Every single one of those things is cheaper than putting up solar power. Because you've got to look at it as either it's the cost to produce power, but it's also what's the cost to not use the power. And it really is the same thing. If I use this much power in the house, and I can say I can buy a solar panel to offset that much, right, which would reduce the draw from the grid, or I can just buy more efficient equipment, which would reduce my draw from the grid as well. And then you go, how much did it cost me solar? How much did it cost me to do whatever I did inside the house, right? But in terms of buying stuff and replacing it with more efficient stuff. And when you look at the math is probably 4 or 5 times cheaper to just, you go, my fridge is perfectly good. Yeah, but it's 10 years old, and fridges today use about 1/4 of the power, and that's the largest use of electricity in your house. And then you go, besides the furnace and hot tub if you have one, right? So things like that, even though they're still working, you got to really not let that get in your way of just because they're working, that it's okay. It can be very wasteful and still running. So this is what it looks like on the roof. And these are the ones here are the panels like this. These are the electric panels. And the ones that are steeper are the tubes that are solar hot water tubes. And obviously there are different angles. The ones that we put the solar power panels on the roof. And I mean, I could have put a frame and changed the angle a bit here and there, but it becomes more complicated, more expensive, and relatively speaking, it doesn't make that much difference. Having the hot water tubes at a much steeper angle is you make a choice, because basically the one thing that I've really become conscious with is the sun is very different at different times of year. I mean, before you sort of go through and you just sort of think of the days being longer and shorter. But if you look at the arc, they're longer and shorter because the arc of the sun is changing. I mean, right now it's going like this in the sky, and in the summer it goes like this, right? Now, I've just sort of historically thought about it as longer days, right? So it therefore produces more power. But when it comes to these systems, it makes a huge difference, because you can imagine these panels are sloped kind of like this. So if the sun is going around like this, that's not really a good fit onto the panels. So the solar electric panels generate their maximum power when the sun is directly on top of them. So obviously these, being relatively flat on the roof, are going to produce most power in the summer. But that's when the longer days are. So you kind of do the math and you say, I could orient them any way I want. But you go, the math is best when I have the longest hours and the most direct impact, and that's the summer. So therefore, the solar electric panels, it's definitely better to be flatter. The solar hot water, obviously the summer, there's a pile more sun, right? I could, if I had put the solar hot water panels in the same arc, like lying at the same flat, like it'd produce tons more in the summer. But think of it, in the summer, people, they're not on the, kids are off school, they don't take showers, waste of summer or something like that, right? And so you don't use anywhere near the amount of hot water in the summer that you do in the winter, even though the potential is there for it. If I tilted them and I was producing them, I'd be wasting my time. The other thing is that if I tilted them flat, come winter, when I am using the most hot water, the angle wouldn't have been great because the sun just sort of skirts the bottom. So this is typically what you would do when you have both systems, is you tip the solar hot water panels high so that in the summer you're going, yeah, there's plenty of time and there's plenty of hot water anyways, even though it's not ideal. But come the fall and the winter, when the arc of the sun is lower, the sun is hitting straight at those tubes. So you get the maximum production. So it's kind of the reverse. But you get the maximum production even though the number of hours is shorter, you're getting a lot more capacity when you need it. And I mean, ultimately, that's the only reason you're putting them on, is because you got to be using it. If I've got the power that's being produced on the hot water side, if I'm not using hot water, I've just got to vent the heat out the side of the house, which is a total waste, right? So that obviously is not a very smart thing to do. So physically, this is how the electricity works. You have the panels themselves here, the solar modules. The sun hits them. It produces direct current. I guess I'm not going to get into the electrical side, but basically, the current we consume in a house is in the sine wave, which is up and down, up and down. So, and the power produced by a solar panel is DC, so it's like a battery. It's sort of just a flat line. And so, to make it usable inside a house, especially a house that's on the grid, like we have, the grid is AC as well, so it's a sine wave, so the two have to be matched. If you're in the country and you can buy DC lights and DC fixtures, and then you have no conversion losses, which means you get more capacity, because every time you convert power, you have losses. So you could use the power that way, but just not in the houses that we have connected to the grid. Plus, all the appliances that we buy are AC, except if anything you buy and put in an RV is DC, right? So if you think you put it on the roof of an RV, all the stuff you plug in, it produces that kind of power, but it doesn't require conversion. So basically, there's this fix. You produce DC, you invert it, you can use it in the house, or you can draw power from the grid through your electrical meter and use it in the house. And at that point where, I don't know, I think it maybe, it was one of the upcoming pictures, so I'll show you how it's connected. But I tell you, the solar electric part, very straightforward. It's really simple. I mean, it took a couple of days to get the whole solar electric part wired in. I mean, you look at the panel, you go, they take up a lot of space, right? So they're pretty big panels. you put a frame down on the roof, you find the support beams of the roof, 1, 2, 3, 4, across, and then they just slide along the rails. So you just slide them along, bolt them down, slide the next one in, bolt it down, slide the next one in, bolt it down. So it goes on really, really quick. So, just a few hours, you can see how well they fit together. Being the crazy engineer that I am, I've got all kinds of measuring equipment in here too. So I decided when I was going to do this that I was going to measure pretty much everything that I possibly could to figure out exactly what I was consuming. So I go way beyond what you would think. So you can imagine. So what I did for the electricity side is in this box I'm measuring the total power into the house. I'm measuring the total power that's being produced by the solar panels, and I'm also measuring the power on the second floor since I have three meters in that one box. And the other one down here, I've got a hot tub, and I've got a dedicated meter to the hot tub because the hot tub turns out to be by far the largest consumer of power in the house. Right? So I wanted to see just how much it was because really we're blind, right? I mean, you have this meter, and you realize how blind we are. You get your meter, you get your bill. It's for a month or two. It's for 2 months actually here, right? So it's for 2 months, and we get it a month after that. So it's like you're really looking at 3 months history. You have no idea when it was used, how much you used, when, whether it was warm, cold, crazy. It's useless. All you go is, how much do I have to pay? That's the only useful thing you get out of the bills, really, right? Because they cover such a huge time. You have no idea what happens in between. So you don't know what consumes more, what difference of my behavior is it. And that's the whole thing is driving the smart grid. And the new meters that we have, those digital meters, they broadcast out to the utility. And so they produce not really granular numbers, but they produce, like these are every 5 minutes I'm collecting data. For the utility, it's every hour. So at least you see in 1 hour blocks where if you take the time, you got to go. I mean, I can do it. I've never done it. I don't know if any of you guys done it. You can, because they give you a login. You can go to the website and get a password and go and see what your consumption was yesterday and look at the history. I've never done it, but to me it's still pretty disconnected. But you can learn something if you do it quickly enough and you realize, oh, in that hour I was doing this. I remember I was doing this, and I didn't realize that's the power I was using at that particular time. So doing it real time I find is a lot more useful. This white box here is the inverter. So that's the box that takes, see here, I've got the 3 sets of panels on the roof. I've got 3 groups of triangles. So there's one conduit back from each of those. And this one is the converted power that's going back to the meter, and that's getting paid on, right? And that plugs into the power grid. Over here, when I produced when I started using the hot water, I took out my tank at the same time. So I had a natural gas big tank, 7 of us in the house. So I replaced it with an instant on hot water tank. So basically the way that works is it's gas powered, it's still like the hot water tank that I had was, but instead of having the hot water heater come on to keep the temperature of that whole tank of water at a certain temperature, regardless of whether I used water or not. So it comes on just to heat this water all the time, regardless of how much you use. This, it's as soon as you start drawing water, it goes, okay, I heat up for the difference. Now, when you've got solar hot water, or water that's heated by the sun, as I do, I've got the tank is sort of sitting here, and and when I draw hot water, it comes from the tank into here. So basically now at the inlet of this heater, it looks at it and goes, geez, it's already hot enough, so I don't have to come on. So it just passes the water through, right? So it's really a lot better setup. So if you go to solar hot water, that's a natural thing to do at the same time, is ditch your gas, your tank.
So what's the heating system of the house? Is it a gas furnace?
Yeah, it's a gas furnace, right?
It's forced in?
Yeah.
So there's no interface between the two?
No, there is. Roger and Heather, they put the coil into the heating system unplugged from the gas. So it's winter now, Roger, so you can tell me where I am. So you can tell us how that's going, right? So
I'm not gathering data like you are.
Oh, I know, that's the problem. I have to put some of my stuff over your head. So which I should, by the way.
But the energy that you are taking from the the panels for the electricity.
Yes.
Are you using that in your own home?
Yes, 100%. I'll show you. Let's see. There you go.
And then the access goes to the grid?
Yeah, this is actually how it works. So you go, you saw that one, so the one wire coming out of the box here, the big one, so that's the sum of all of them. It's converted to AC. It's coming out here. It physically is the same piece of wire. So it's coming up here and it's going to this disconnect. The utility requires you to be able to just disconnect the system from the grid at any time so they can come here and do that themselves. So it's not tucked away inside the house, right? Now, so you see I've got 2 meters, and this is the way it works. I've got the dirty pipe right there, is the pipe coming from the transformer that's in front of Roger's house. And it feeds four of our houses around this little circle, and there are 4 houses that are fed, which is pretty typical of a transformer, one of those transformers. Feeds about 4 houses. So one of the feeds comes over here. This is the feed of power into my house, right? And so what happens is, whatever's produced by the solar electric system goes here, it goes through this meter. Then, and actually the way the wiring is done, the cables come up here, and then there's metal butts, some pieces of metal that go across the whole top. And so basically it comes here, there are pieces of metal that connect this, and they connect here, and they connect that there. So basically the power is flowing from here onto this bus. Now so it's at the same point that the utility feed is coming in. So now the question is, the house uses whatever the house uses. So if it's being produced here, anything that's being produced here has a choice, because at this point it can either go into the house or it can go back through here into Roger's house, right? Because that's electrically once you're, and it's the same. The nuclear power plant just has a bigger cable than this, right? But it basically just hooks onto the grid, and then so you've got 2 kind of completely separate things that are happening at the same time. So you get power pushed on, and at the same time, so you can think of if you have a tarp and you're pouring water onto the tarp in different places. So the water is flowing in. Then you got a bunch of holes in a whole bunch of different places. So the water's flowing in, right? So they're related, because obviously for power to flow, it needs to go around in a circle. So it needs exactly what you pour in needs to be used, because it's not stored anywhere, right? It's one of the biggest power issues we have, is we can't store this stuff very easily. So there's a delicate balance, and the utility is always doing that live. So they're, the more that's produced here, they turn down the coal plants, turn them up, so they're always doing that kind of management. So we've got all these little sources now. Solar, it starts to push on. So if the sun comes out, this starts to create more power. And so because this is the closest point, I'm going to use all of the power that's produced every time. So I use every drop of power that's produced by this. If I've used everything and it's producing even more than I'm using, then the rest of it gets pushed back onto the grid. So it just then goes to the next connection point. So just like there's a connection point here where it has no choice, like it's just flowing along a piece of wire, but once it gets here, it can go here or here, right? So then the closest point is to dump here. So it gets used by the house. So any overage then goes out here, and it goes back to the next point, which is the output of the transformer, where the 4 houses are fed. So it comes along that one, and it gets to that point, and it goes, I can go to this house, I can go to that house, I can go to that house. The one with the shortest wires is the least resistance, and so current flows that way. Roger is the closest one, so he has green power produced by me. Right?
For free.
For free, that's right. So here's sort of the flow of arrows, right?
Now that solar inverter, so it's really a net inverter in a way.
How do you mean?
I mean that it comes into your home first and then the rest goes away.
Yes, because the way power flows, it splits by the inverse of impedance, right? So which basically means the shorter the distance. If I have a piece of wire this long and a piece of wire this long, current splits in the reverse. So if this one's 10 times longer than that, 10 times more current goes through the short piece than through the long piece. So it just does exactly the opposite, right? So since my house is the closest point of consumption, and why would it go up all the way through all those wires, so you're going, it's going uphill basically, right? So
I have a question.
Yes.
The way it's connected right now, I I think in case of power outage, you won't be able to use your energy.
That's right, and that's exactly true. There are different ways to set up this system. The way that Ontario Hydro requires you in order to participate in their program is that it's connected like this, which means it's parallel, it's direct grid connected, right? So what happens is this, and all the inverters have the sensing mechanism, and it has to be programmed to be set up one way or another. But if there's a power loss at the grid side, you know, you think, oh great, but I'm still producing. And you go, yeah, but the problem is it's a safety thing, right? If I'm still pushing power into what may be a short circuit, which is why the power is out, is I could kill somebody at the other end of that piece of wire, right? So this has a voltage sensing mechanism. So it's sensing on the other side, and it says as soon as if the grid is lost, this disconnects internally. And when the grid comes back, it comes back as well. So do you lose power? Yeah, if there's a power outage during the day, I'm actually out of power like everybody else. The only way to have avoided that would have been not to participate in the program, to go, and before this box would have been to come from here to a set of batteries, right? I wouldn't have connected to the grid. I wouldn't have connected to the grid, and I'd have stored and consumed off my batteries. But that they don't want you to do that in a city environment, right? So that's the reality.
I think you could have disconnected the two.
Yeah, you could, and you could. The only thing is, you know, the cost of the batteries would have added about $15,000 to my system, which actually serves no purpose whatsoever, except in that particular couple of hours a year that you lose power for, right? So instead, you take that money and you put more solar panels on the roof so you can produce more power that's serving you every single day, right? So if the time that you would set it up the other way, even if this program exists, like if you're out in the country, you'd go, okay, well, I want that capability. I'm gonna store the energy I produce during the day. I'm not going to connect to the grid. Then I need to store it in the battery, and that way I'll have energy regardless. And a colleague of mine up in Ottawa has a little more solar than I do, and he's off grid because it would have cost $40,000 for hydro to pull a line to his house. And so he said, why spend that money? I'll just buy it. I'll put my own system, excuse me. And so he was up, he had people coming over to his house. His house was full during that ice storm in Montreal when that whole area was down for 3 weeks. So he was working like nothing happened. So he still had it. And he had enough to run his whole house all the time on batteries as well. So, you know, he really planned it out that way. So if you want to see the math, this is one of my Power Stream bills. And I get 2 bills because they set up a totally separate account, because you saw here, meter, serial number. So I've got a meter, I get this meter that's spinning one way, meaning I'm sucking in power and using power. And this meter is running backwards, and it shows that it's running backwards. And and that means I'm producing, and I get paid for that. So I end up with a bill like this, which has where is it? So I've got one that says credit all the time, like this one, 542 credit, right? And the other bill says whatever I consume. And so this is from when was it, May to July last year. So my electric bill, so consumption in the house, $236. What I got from here, $542. So and that's for a 2-month period, right? So I'm actually all summer, from about the spring all the way through to about end of September, I'm way ahead, way ahead.
What's your consumption? Yeah, because you're measuring this.
Oh yeah.
What's your typical consumption of power during that?
Well, here we can look. I'm basically I consume about 20,000 kilowatt hours a year. So that, obviously varies with the season, but plus or minus, that's what it is. Which is probably more than a typical house, because obviously there's 7 of us in the house. So my mother-in-law lives with us, so it's more. No matter, even though I've done all those efficiency things.
And what's just so I can guess this, when was the house built? And
the house was bungalow, built in 1964. In 1999, I built the 2nd floor. on it when my mother-in-law moved in with us, and we had the twins. So it's just a bungalow, now one clone on top of the other side. So
And what's the area?
about 3,200 square feet.
So I got a question. How did you deal with your roof shingle? When you put that-
They have a look at them, obviously, when you're producing, because if you look at the roof here, right? So you look at the condition, obviously you don't want to be doing all this work only to have to replace the roof in 2 years, right? You have to pull it back up and do that, right? So my roof, because I built the second floor in 2000 or 1999, 2000, but it's like, what, 10 years old, so I got plenty of time left on the roof. So I didn't worry about that. When the time comes, it'll be 2 days' work to take it off, doing the roofing, 2 days' work to put it back on. So at some point, I'll be at 4 days of labor to do that, so a couple of $1,000.
Do you think that will extend the life of the shingles?
Absolutely will, and the interesting thing is, and I'd read about it, but until I built it myself, I didn't believe it, right? And you go, but there's a picture right I have right at the end, because it's actually we already saw here. There. So on this day, this picture was taken by Power Stream. They wanted to do a piece on my house because I was their first solar customer, right? And or they were my first solar customer. So I was the first guy they plugged in solar-wise, so they wanted to do a piece on their program. So we were up on the roof, right? Now, one of the pictures they had me in all these different positions, sitting down, standing up, and all that. So one of them was sort of sitting on the crest of the roof here with my hand, and so of course my hand was on it. It's like, whoa, it's like too hot to touch. You cannot touch the roof and actually hold it. And so when you slide, and that's what I was showing the guys. I was there going, I read about this. You put your hand here and you go, holy cow, I can't touch it. And you slide it under the panel because there's about this much clearance under the panel. That is room temperature, right? It's like this ambient temperature. Huge difference. So what they say is that roofs last longer under this condition. But you go, yeah, it's true for the pieces that are under the roof, but what about the pieces that's not under the roof? When that wears in, it's still got to change the whole roof, right? So it's true, but it doesn't really matter.
Also less cooling needed.
But that's right. But that's the big benefit, because the big benefit is when the roof isn't hot, that means that heat isn't being transferred into the attic, which means it's not being transferred into the attic into the second floor, right? And that makes a really big difference. So that's a real benefit, especially having done as much of the surface of the roof that I could. So I basically, wiped out about 3/4 of that surface area is now way cooler from that effect. So.
In the winter, what's the solar credit from? I suppose it's much smaller.
Yeah, I just got the last one, which they screwed up. It's funny, last month they screwed up my electric bill and my gas bill, which is really both the same month. Gas, they charged me as my gas bill. I got a bill for $900, and I was there going, holy smokes! I'm running I got the hot water. What am I feeding for gas? Like the furnace, and it was November, right? So you're going, it hasn't been really cold, and I got the solar hot water covering off all of that. So what's? And so I went up to the meter and I looked at the number, and the guys had put the meter reading was 9788, and they'd read 99. So they'd read 1,000 more than I should, right? So it's like. So I phoned them in, and they said, oh, yeah, I guess that probably is. And yeah, I guess it is a little out of your usage pattern. And you're going, yeah, like it's more than I've used in the last 5 years put together, right? So they're going, I don't think it's a possible number, right? So they, I just got it today. I got it in my pocket. So they gave me, credit. So now my bill is $87. So a little better on that. But they made a mistake as well on the solar credit, which is interesting. I tell you, when they say you got to make watch the bills. Well, the bill is interesting, and I guess we all need to watch it because otherwise it would be a problem. Because you go here, so these numbers were right, which is this is the last reading, this is the reading we measured, therefore the difference between the two, this is the amount of power you produced. And then in the math here, and it said here, so it said this is the number of kilowatt hours, that's the rate. But then the number, so it said, 1,200 kilowatt hours, there's your rate. And then it was like $29.30. I was like, what? And I know it produces less in November and December, but I think it was that little. And the number was actually pretty close to this. So it really should have been $400 and something that I should have got the check for. And instead it was $29, right? So I phoned them up and they go, oh yeah, that's right. I don't know, because that's a deeper math problem. That's not, I mean, I understand the gas problem. That's a guy physically going, is that needle at the 8 or the 9? Right? I can make that mistake too. That's a human error, right? But this is an electronically generated thing where the numbers were right all the way through, except for that value. So, and it was only because I thought it was crazily low that I even challenged it. Otherwise, you know, this is real money. But the answer is, yeah, obviously it produces way less in the winter months. I really don't expect it to produce that much, but it still produces, you know, $100, $150 a month in the winter. Like I said, my last check, which was from November to from middle of October to middle of December for those 2 months, it was still $400. So, you know, you can't complain about that. It's still producing a couple $100. So here's actually, if we look back at last year, because the numbers are here, right? For last year, so you go for the February bill. So I only produced 147 kilowatt hours. Then between February and March, you know, a total of 400. So obviously a big jump, right? Because this was put in at this time, so at the beginning of January. So this was about a month. So look at the difference. You know, month 147. The next month, right, 500 and something. 2 months after that, 1,300. Right? So you can tell they go to really rocket something. But
Well, without saying consumption, that's really production.
that's production. Yeah. So when they say production, that's why it's all credit. Right? So these are all, but obviously they're bills, right? So they go, we print on the same bill all the time, right? So that's why. So it says consumption. You're right. It should be production. I guess once there are enough people, they'll have 2 bills, and this will say production, and these numbers will be, you know, those numbers will be, well, at least those numbers are negative, right? So.
What's the nominal capacity of a?
My system is 6 kilowatts peak. 5.94.
Are you supposed to get more solar income in the winter or in the summer?
Summer for sure,
Yes.
because the
Longer sunlight.
oh yeah, you've got 2 things. You've got longer days, and you've got more direct contact. So you end up with a big difference, about 10 to 1, summer to winter. So this is a typical day, solar day. You know, so it's midnight, and the green is what the solar panels are producing. So you can see, when was this? Middle of September, right? So middle of September. So we go up, starts producing power around 7 o'clock. So I tell you, you look at this because you know this is the equipment I've got. So you can tell exactly when the dawn was, when sunset was, and you can see that going. Right? But you can see that starting from about, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, it's producing more than what the consumption is in the house. Right? And it shows you how, to me, one of the big surprises with the house was, of course, because we've been in total darkness about how we consume power, I was really surprised to see how choppy it is, right? You know, we think of, we consume more, then we get up, we consume more power, and then we go to work, it goes down a little bit, and then you know, we get back and it goes up and then eventually it goes down and it goes back down. You know, okay, that's kind of what I expected, but you go, all right, there's still quite a lot of power used at night, and that's all those loads that still stay on, all the computers that are still in sleep mode, the Rogers box is still, even though it says off, it's still on because all the electronics stay on anyways. So, you know, all of those things mean that you're still using power 24 hours a day, right? And then those could be, you know, the fridge opening or the fridge's compressor coming on to bring the temperature down, or it could have been, you know, one of the baseboard heaters coming on in one of the rooms for a couple of minutes to heat up the space. But you can see that for this whole time, it's producing more power than it's consuming. So not only am I offsetting completely what I'm consuming during the day, but it means all this extra I'm actually pushing into the grid when the grid needs it most. Right? Like the grid isn't running out of capacity at 2 o'clock in the morning. The grid is running out of capacity when it's a hot summer day, when everybody's got their air conditioners on, and guess what? That's a sunny day, right? It's never not a sunny day. So sunny day is when these things produce the most. So that's where solar electricity has such a great cross with the grid, because it's producing its maximum predictably, exactly when the grid needs it most. Whereas wind, systems are a lot bigger, but it may be, and it typically is, there's a lot less wind in the summer than there is in the fall and the winter, and it's completely unpredictable, so you can't count on it delivering when you need it. Whereas this, it cannot help but deliver its absolute best when the grid needs it most. So that's the perfect alignment for that. So now, so you can see basically what I'm doing is at this point, I'm drawing power from the grid. So at this point, I start pushing power over to Roger's house. And then by about 6 o'clock, I start drawing power back from the grid again. And because it's full of electrons and it's hard wired together, it just flows like a wave, right? It's flowing one way for that time, and then just flows back the other way. So it's seamless. Like you don't have to think about it. It's like even though I'm going through all of this stuff, but you put this on your roof, you don't have to think about it again. You don't have to go in the furnace room and go, oh my God, what's this number? It's like it's completely invisible. There's zero maintenance completely. So what I wanted to show you here was when was this? So this was in February 24th, February, over a bunch of days. And what I want to do is go and get a screenshot of this because it shows you, again, we think of when we buy stuff that it just kind of works the same way all the time. It's like, you turn the TV, it goes on, it does really predictable stuff, and then you turn it off, right? But you look at this, and you go, oh, I've got solar on the roof, and you go, well, it's not just like on, off, where it's not light, dark. It's like you can see, okay, these were really rainy days. These were rain, partly, cloudy, sunny, and then look at this, right? Really dark, and then bright sun, rain, dark sun. So you see, holy smokes, it's a pretty variable situation, right? And then one day, beautiful sun, right?
You've got those are pretty low slope panels. Do you have problems with snow buildup on them?
Oh, like right now, yeah. That's the downside of the way I've got it set up. And I've done the math, and it's not worth doing anything about it because there's so few. Because it was funny because we've got, being at an engineering company where I work, my head of R&D goes, oh, we can do some stuff for you. Let's see, we can have it tilting up, and then maybe we can, we have a little heater circuit running across and melt off the snow, and I'm there going, okay, well, let's see what we could gain out of it. So, you do a little bit of math, and you say, okay, well, for the days, like right now, the days at this time of year that I've had no snow on the panels, and you go, produces 3-4 kilowatt hours. So you're going, okay, that's like $3, right? Even at 82 cents, right? So you're going, okay, so $3, $3, $3. Okay, so if I lose it, it's going to, like anything, touching anything like increasing the slope so that I could produce more in the winter. And it would make sense. Like if it was convenient, and I didn't have to climb up on the roof in the middle of winter, right? Is it that I go, and the fact that I didn't have these 3 triangular sections, it would be worth the trouble to have a frame that you could just move one position and say, here, it's flat in the summer, which is what I want, and then in the fall, or someday in October, I would go up on the roof and go, crank it up maybe by a foot to increase that tilt. It would help keep the snow off, and I would get a better alignment with the sun. And so I looked at doing it last year, and I was like, it would cost a couple of $1,000s to do that. And you're going at $3 a day, for those few hours, for those days that it's off, you're going, that's about a 9,000 year payback. It would be good to do it. So what I was thinking about, which I didn't get a chance to try this year, was to use some of those eaves heating, the heating wires you can put up on the roof, but to sort of drape them over the panels. And obviously they draw electricity, so not a smart offset, except that, it's not like right now, it's not snowing now. Well, there's no sun either, so I wouldn't be producing anything. But in a sunny day, if it was covered with, so if I could turn it on for half an hour and melt the snow off and then turn it off, and then it could produce it, that might end up being a cheap way of clearing the panels, and then, without having to do, some kind of more aggressive changing of the slopes. But you can do that. If I'd done that, I'd have had to get a structural engineer to review it. It would have had to go through the town, a different part of the town to get for zoning, right? Not for the zoning, but the building permit process, because wind can get underneath them and pull them up. So you put a lot more stress on the roof. And I may have had to do, the roof may not have been able to tolerate that. I don't know, because I didn't do it. But that's one of the things, I know Roger had to go through that because his panels are up there, and so, you know, it's, if you're putting just the solar electric panels and you're putting them flush to the roof, they don't do a stress assessment. You don't have to get an engineer to, you know, do all that.
But you still needed a permit.
Oh, you do need a permit. You do need a permit. Now the guys that I had and Roger had, I mean, they take care of that stuff. You don't bother doing it. You're not involved in it, but it has to be done. And then the inspectors came after the whole Markham's whole building. The inspection department came over to my basement for a day while they went through it because they'd never done one before. So they're going, how are we supposed to inspect something we haven't got experience with, right? So it was a whole big education process.
So is there tons of snow, like if there's a huge snowstorm, do you need to go up on the roof and do something like that? Or?
I don't need to, but if I wanted to produce something, I would have to. I got some pictures of a roof. I mean, this literally when it's, the difference would be if I got snow on the roof, it produces like this on a sunny day compared to that on a sunny day, right? So
you do go in.
once there's about, I don't. Right? Winter, you go, this is like there's snow on the roof, it's slippery, and it's really cold. Okay, I'm like, this is not a really good idea. This might cover my funeral expenses. You know, so, right? So you go, yeah. So it's not obviously it's not something you do, but once it's more than a couple of inches, you're pretty much done until it blows off or rains off, or you know. So that's like, it doesn't usually stay on that long. Last January we had a kind of a weird January. We got like 4 or 5 inches like really quickly, and so what happens is because if there's like say if it snows like tonight a couple of inches, well then tomorrow as it warms up because the panels are dark, right? Is there's still light that gets through, and then the panels turn on, and so that there's still heat at the top, and then melts the snow and it clears off by itself. But if you get a heavy snowstorm, it's at night, and so then you get 3 or 4 inches by the morning, and then if it's cold and then it freezes on there, well then it's heavy wet snow that gets frozen, and that's what happened last January, and it just sat there, and it just snowed for like a few days, and then it was clear, and now they're going 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, because it had this big frozen chunk on it, right? So I was very tempted to climb up there. But
So, what is the efficiency in terms of the variations of the solar energy that you got during the day and the amount of electricity that you can generate? Obviously, a lot of them cannot, waste it, right? Because sometimes you have peaks and sometimes you have.
oh, sure. Well, that's a good question. So you go. So like for example here, and this is February, right? So my system is a 6 kilowatt peak system. So you're looking at here, that's 5. So that top line is 5. This line is 4. So this is about 4.2 kilowatts or something like that. The most that it produces in the maximum summer ideal for me is about 5.2 that it gets up to. So you go, but it says 6. You never see the peak. You never see the peak because first of all, you're not aligned exactly perpendicular to the sun, right? So you're going, or you are for half an hour, and then the sun is either off on this angle or off on that angle, so you don't get the efficient transfer of power. And then so you've got that plus just that you've got the losses in the wires as it flows from the panels down to the inverter. When you convert it from DC to AC, you lose 4 or 5% as well, right? And then you run the cable, then it runs the cables up there, so you end up losing. They say about 80% is what you should count on as really getting peak. So I mean, I'm getting 5 in the summer compared to the 6 peak rating, and you go, that's just the way it is.
What's the solar aspect of the roof relative to due south?
Mine is actually, I'm about, so if you go due south is here, and I'm pointed this way. So I'm about 30 degrees off or so. So pretty good. And I think on our court, I am the best house on our street, right? Roger, what do you think?
I think they said that the house with the red roof was perfect.
Oh yeah.
Just slightly
They are, that's right, because they've really got straight south. That's right.
Does the shape of the roof affect the number of panels, etc. you can put on?
Oh yeah, because you look at mine, and I had to live with my roof is kind of like it's sort of like this, and then there's a triangle, and then there's another triangle off on the side. So I had to go, so they go, you've got the panels that are shaped like this, right? So you go, so if the roof is going down like this, you go, sorry, can't put anything over there. So if I'd have had a nice rectangular house, I probably could have got 5, 6 more panels on there, right? Which would have probably, it would have been another kilowatt. Because each of these is about 200 watts. This panel, right? So mine was pretty awkward that way. I mean, it actually had to be split into 3 sections, right? So it's pretty unusual. Like, Roger, you have great, nice, big rectangle in the wrong direction.
Yeah, they're gonna have to put them on an angle.
Yeah, so you realize there's all this baggage goes, and he's got a better slope than I do, so the snow's not going to stay on his anywhere near as they stay on mine, except that he's twisted a little more. So now to get the sun, they have to build a frame to get them up, so you're not on the back of the house and you're not losing. So there's always work to do. You very rarely are in the ideal, which takes away from the efficiency, of course, right? Especially because Roger's going to be a little different. So you just have to go. You do the best you can. You see what it does.
What about trees?
Well, of course, trees would make a difference. I don't have any tree. I have a huge tree in the backyard, about 100-year-old silver maple, which is about twice as high as a house. It's huge, and but it's not. But the sun sort of swings around in front, so I may lose. In the summer, I may lose an hour because it sort of arcs across the top of the tree. But I'm not going to cut the tree down for 2 kilowatt hours. I'll cut the tree.
But flat roofs. Flat roofs?
Well, flat roof, you just use the frame. So the same kind of frame that I have for my solar hot water, you would just put the panels on those. So
Right.
no problem.
What about if there's a strong wind?
Well, that's why they would do like you would have a structural engineer would design the frame, and it would have to be obviously secured in the roof to withstand that underblowing stress. Some people on flat roofs actually just install it flat, and then you just take your lumps in terms of production because of the Arcus it would be worse than mine, right? But at least then there's no stress on the roof at all. So I've seen it done both ways.
And there are support systems that just use weights.
Yeah.
So you're not actually penetrating the roof.
Yeah, that's the other thing. On a flat roof, you don't want to be drilling a whole pile of holes, right? Because obviously the water will find a way.
Well,
Right.
I just want to make sure you have enough time to get to the economic side.
Oh yeah, it just starts I think in about an hour.
Okay.
Yes, there's kind of.
Have you calculated the winter and summer capacity factor?
Not directly, apart from anecdotally knowing that it's about that it's right now it's producing over these months on average, and we can actually after this, if you stay, I can dial in live over here over the net. And we can look at live data over the last few weeks or whatever. And right now, I was looking at it yesterday, and it was like producing 4 or 5 kilowatt hours on a sunny day, right? Where in the summer it's producing 30 on a sunny day, 32 on a sunny day kilowatt hours. So you're going, here's your difference right there, right? So it's time and impact, right? Nice. So there you go. You wanted snow? This was snow. This was, see look, 21st January last, so December 21st last year, right? So there you go. So it didn't produce any power until the end of January, basically, because that was thick. That was like this thick, and it was frozen solid stuff.
Wow.
I wanted to go up there and change it, but I really couldn't do it. But look at the hot water. Hot water doesn't matter. Obviously the slope, right? The slope is that much steeper, right? So great for hot water. So all the way through the snow, the hot water is there no matter what. With that kind of slope, I mean, solar electric would have been great too, but you'd have had to stand it up like that. So let's look at solar hot water now for difference, because the math, if you're interested in the math of it, as Roger was saying, the math for solar hot water is a lot better than the math for solar electric, right? It's just not as sexy, I guess. I don't know. Solar electricity seems to be so much, it's higher tech, or it seems higher tech. Heating water with the sun has been around forever, of course. And so when we put solar hot water on our roofs, basically what we're doing is we're putting these pipes on the roof, like you saw those round tubes. And so the sun heats the tube up, and you end up with colder water getting pumped out. It picks up the heat as it passes along the tubes. The hot water comes back. It goes through a coil that's inside a tank, and because the water is a lot hotter inside the coil, it's like a kettle, right? So it just radiates out and it heats the water in the tank. And then when you would use the water out of the tank, you're drawing from the top of the tank, which is, of course, hot water goes to the top, the cold water sinks, so you end up drawing the hot water off the top. And that second graph, this is a chart I got off the net because it was pretty close to what we had, is in commercial systems, or if I was going to use this to heat my floors or really heat 100% of the house from it without needing using a furnace, is I could have had a hot water boiler and then had the coil, so if there wasn't enough heat transferred from the sun, there would be heat transfer here. So it's just another way of doing it. So yeah, so there's the tubes in the back, and standing up for the peak winter, and the sun, flat solar hot electric panels for a peak on the summer. So it looks really complicated. Basically, so you've got the tank, here's the tankless hot water that I talked about. I got the tubes. There's this whole control system, which you don't really have to worry about. It shows you the temperature coming in and coming out. And then you've got control switches, and that's all, there's all this little computer that does all the switching automatically. It's hotter on the roof now. So basically what happens is, obviously, you know, as you're transferring the heat here, it gets cold. But if it's a cold day outside, or if it's cloudy, then you're not just going to automatically circulate all the heat, because there could be a point where it's actually warmer in here than it is on the roof, right? And so there's temperature sensor here, temperature sensor, so going out, coming back, and it does all the math of, okay, it's warmer, there's a gap, but the sun's beat on it for a while, so the temperature gets hotter up there. Once it reaches a certain point, it comes down, pumps the heat out, waits again until it's hot again, pumps it out again. So but it's done all automatically, so you don't have to worry about it.